The mysterious artifact. The cold vacuum of space stretched endlessly before them, an unbroken sea of darkness. Orbiting silently, beyond the reach of human civilization, was a small object, at first, a mere dot in the distance. It was easy to ignore, until it wasn't. When the Deep Space Probe first identified it, the scientists thought it was just another piece of debris drifting through the vast emptiness. The anomaly had been discovered near the edge of the solar system, its coordinates marking a location that no one had expected to find anything of significance. It was a remote region of space, far from any star, beyond the influence of Earth's protective gravity, but the object was unlike anything humanity had encountered before. The first scans showed something extraordinary, a faint, pulsing energy field that surrounded it, one that seemed to thrum with life. At first, they couldn't make sense of it. The readings were erratic, fluctuating between regular and chaotic as though the object itself was alive. Dr. Emily Zhang, a leading astrophysicist, was the first to suggest that it wasn't just an object, it might be a form of technology, far more advanced than anything humanity had ever encountered. The idea was almost laughable at first, but the longer they observed it, the more undeniable it became. The object had structure. It wasn't a natural asteroid or just a chunk of metal, it had design. Its surface shimmered in a way that no known materials could replicate. It pulsed faintly, almost like a heartbeat. Each time the scientists tried to study it, it would send out powerful electromagnetic surges, knocking out their instruments for minutes at a time. No one knew what it was, but they all knew one thing for sure, it didn't want to be touched. For weeks, the research station orbiting the object had been struggling with the unknown artifact, located just outside the orbit of Pluto. They had tried everything, scanning it, analyzing its energy signatures, and even sending drones to get a closer look. But every time they tried to touch it, every time they attempted to learn its secrets, the artifact would respond with violent energy surges, pushing everything away like a petulant child rejecting the touch of another. The team was about to give up, considering the artifact to be some sort of alien warning or a trap, when Captain Sarah Larkin was called in. She had been out in the field for years, known for her level-headed thinking and unconventional problem-solving tactics. But what made her stand out was her expertise in engineering, not diplomacy or science. When humanity had faced its greatest crises, she had always been the one to think outside the box, facing impossible odds with calm and ingenuity. Larkin stepped onto the research station with a sense of quiet determination, knowing that she was expected to be the answer to a problem no one had been able to solve. As she entered the operations room, the team looked at her with a mixture of hope and exhaustion. Everyone knew the risks, and no one had any real faith that she could do what the countless experts had failed to do. But Sarah Larkin had always believed in one thing: if a problem was solvable, there was a way to solve it. The head scientist, Dr. Zhang, greeted her with a resigned expression. "Captain Larkin, we've been at this for weeks. Nothing works. Every time we try to approach it, it pushes back. We're not even sure what it is." Larkin looked through the reinforced glass at the artifact, floating in the center of the chamber like some ancient relic of a long-forgotten war. The energy pulses were softer now, but they still sent ripples through the air, making the lights flicker. There was something about the way it stood, like a predator waiting for the right moment to strike. She didn't need to be a scientist to feel it. "You want me to do what, exactly?" Larkin asked, crossing her arms, her voice steady, though the unease inside her was growing. Dr. Zhang looked at her. "We need someone to make contact. We've run out of options. Maybe it's a human thing. Maybe it will respond to you differently than it has to the others. It doesn't like any of the alien races we've sent, but you. You're human. The only variable we haven't accounted for." Larkin stared at the object for a long moment. What was it? What was it trying to tell them? The artifact seemed to pulse in time with her heartbeat, a rhythmic thrum that resonated deep within her. She couldn't explain it, but something inside her knew this wasn't just a challenge, it was a call. A call to her. It was alive, in some way that humans didn't yet understand. "What happens if it doesn't like me?" she asked, her voice quiet, but her eyes never leaving the object. Zhang hesitated, then spoke the truth: "We don't know. Every alien species we've tried to pair with it has been violently rejected. The artifact doesn't allow anyone close to it. But if you can't make contact, we don't have a plan." The room fell silent. The weight of their collective failure hung heavy in the air. But Sarah Larkin was a woman of action. She had never been one to shy away from the unknown. And something inside her knew she couldn't leave this hanging. If anyone was going to make sense of the artifact, it would be her. "All right," she said. "Get me suited up." "I'll try." A few minutes later, she stood in the suit that had been prepared for her, a standard jumpsuit, sterile and gray, but it felt wrong, like a uniform meant for failure. She could feel the eyes of the research team on her, their uncertainty palpable. Yet, there was no turning back now. The door to the chamber hissed open, and she stepped through, the cool air of the room sending a shiver down her spine. The artifact was closer now, its presence overwhelming. The closer she got, the more she could feel it, pulsing in her mind. She knew there was no going back. She was either going to succeed or fail, but one thing was certain: humanity needed to understand what this artifact was, and it needed to happen now. Each step she took was deliberate, her boots echoing softly on the metal floor. As she neared the artifact, she could feel it watching her, like some ancient creature aware of her every move. The pulsating energy became stronger, more insistent. She reached out, hesitating only for a moment before she placed her hand against its smooth surface. At that moment, the entire room seemed to hold its breath. And then, without warning, the artifact responded. A shockwave of energy surged through the chamber, knocking the team back and sending alarms blaring. But it wasn't a rejection this time. It was something else, a subtle, almost imperceptible shift, as though the artifact recognized her. For the first time since its discovery, it seemed alive. The artifact awakens. The energy inside the chamber surged once more, pulsing through the room like a living creature. Captain Larkin stood frozen, her hand still pressed against the surface of the artifact. The crackling energy had not rejected her, but instead, it was accepting her. The room was silent for a moment, as if holding its collective breath. Then, a low hum resonated from the artifact, filling the space, vibrating through the very walls of the chamber. "Captain Larkin, are you all right?" Dr. Zhang's voice crackled in her earpiece, panic rising in her tone. Larkin didn't answer immediately. She was too absorbed in the sensation she was feeling. The artifact's pulse was strong, not threatening, but oddly comforting. It felt almost like a heartbeat, synchronized with her own. As her fingertips pressed deeper into the smooth, metallic surface, she could feel it shifting under her touch. The material was warm, despite the chill in the room, and it seemed to grow softer, more pliable, as though responding to her. "Captain." Zhang's voice repeated, this time more insistent. Larkin blinked and pulled her hand back quickly, as if snapping out of a trance. The humming energy seemed to stabilize, and the artifact's pulsations slowed down. But she could still feel it, like a presence watching her from within. It was unlike anything she had ever felt before, an alien intelligence, but not hostile. It was curious. Intelligent. It was waiting. "I'm fine," Larkin finally replied, her voice steady, though inside, her heart was racing. She could feel her pulse thudding in her temples, adrenaline rushing through her veins. The artifact had recognized her. No one had expected this. No one had expected it to respond in any way, let alone allow contact. "Status," she called out, her voice carrying across the comms. The team, though still shaken, scrambled to check their instruments. On the display panels, the energy readings were still spiking, though not in the violent surges they had seen before. It was now a steady flow of energy, a rhythm that matched Larkin's own heartbeat. It was as if the artifact and the captain were now in sync, communicating in a way no one could understand. "It's still active," Dr. Zhang reported, her voice filled with awe. "The pulses are steady, but the intensity is lower now. It's not rejecting you." Larkin glanced back at the artifact. It was no longer just a piece of technology. The shimmering plates on its surface had subtly shifted, revealing a series of intricate lines and symbols, glowing faintly in the dim light. Alien writing, perhaps. Or a form of communication. It was hard to tell, but the more she looked at it, the more she felt as though the artifact was trying to speak, trying to show her something. "What is it?" Larkin muttered under her breath, more to herself than anyone else. At that moment, her vision blurred. The walls around her seemed to fade away, replaced by strange, flowing patterns. It wasn't a hallucination, this was real. The interface that had once been absent now appeared before her eyes, lines of alien symbols and figures scrolling in front of her like a digital display. It was as if the artifact had integrated itself with her, or perhaps, it was using her senses to interpret what it needed to show. "Captain." Dr. Zhang's voice broke through her thoughts again, urgent now. "What's happening?" "Captain Larkin, do you copy?" Larkin took a deep breath and blinked, trying to focus on the words. They weren't in any language she recognized. They weren't even words, really, just symbols, patterns, data. It was like looking at a map of some distant, unknown world. Her mind raced, but she tried to stay calm. The artifact was showing her something, and it wasn't hostile. It was just, trying to communicate in its own way. "I'm seeing something," Larkin replied slowly, her voice filled with wonder. "It's like a map. I'm not sure what it is, but it's alive. It's alive inside me." On the other end, Dr. Zhang hesitated. "Are you sure, Captain? What do you mean by alive?" Larkin looked down at her hand, which was now glowing faintly, the energy flowing beneath her skin, in sync with the artifact. The symbols were moving, rearranging themselves like a puzzle she couldn't yet solve. The artifact had recognized her, maybe it had chosen her. And it wanted her to see something, understand something. "I'm not sure yet," Larkin admitted. "But it's communicating with me. I don't think it's meant for any other species, just humans." Suddenly, the temperature in the room dropped. A harsh, mechanical sound echoed through the chamber, followed by a low rumbling. The artifact began to vibrate again, but this time, it was different. The metallic surface trembled, its shimmering plates shifting rapidly, almost like it was coming to life. The ground beneath Larkin's feet shook, and the hum in the air grew louder, building into something more intense. "Captain, get out of there. It's becoming unstable." Dr. Zhang shouted over the comms. Larkin's mind raced. The artifact was reacting differently now, something was happening. It was like it was awakening, responding to the interaction. She could feel the energy coursing through her body, its power growing stronger by the second. It wasn't rejecting her, but it was transforming her. It was as if the artifact was testing her, pushing her limits, trying to understand if she was worthy of what it had to offer. Her breath came in short bursts as the artifact's energy field intensified. The walls of the chamber began to glow with the same eerie, alien light. Larkin could feel the force pressing against her body, the artifact pulling at her in ways that were both terrifying and exhilarating. This wasn't just technology, it was an entity, something alive, something with purpose. "Sarah!" A voice screamed from the comms. It was Sergeant Oliver, one of the security personnel who had been monitoring her from the control room. "You need to get out of there now." Larkin felt the pressure around her chest as if something was squeezing her, but she didn't want to retreat, not yet. She had come too far. The connection was too important. She had to understand what the artifact wanted from her. She had to know why it was reacting this way. What did it mean? What did it want? The energy intensified once again, a blinding light filling the room, and Larkin braced herself, her body trembling with the force of the connection. Just as she thought she might collapse under the pressure, the artifact suddenly released her. The light faded, and the room fell eerily silent. "Captain?" Dr. Zhang's voice sounded distant, shaky. "Captain, are you okay?" Larkin blinked, her vision clearing. The artifact had stopped vibrating. The energy field had dissipated, leaving the room in an unsettling stillness. She was gasping for air, her body trembling, but there was a sense of peace now, like a storm had passed, leaving calm in its wake. "I'm fine," Larkin said, her voice still shaky, but stronger than before. She glanced at the artifact. It was no longer pulsating with energy, but she could feel its presence, its awareness. It wants something. But it's not clear yet. The artifact was silent, watching. Waiting. And Larkin realized something. This was just the beginning. The artifact had awakened, and now it was time for her to discover its true purpose. The Chosen One. Captain Sarah Larkin stood motionless, her mind racing, her heart still hammering in her chest. The artifact, now eerily still, pulsed with an undercurrent of energy that seemed to hum just beneath the surface of her thoughts. It had accepted her, chosen her, whatever it was, she had become its focal point. The room around her seemed to fade, her attention solely consumed by the object before her, its alien symbols and flickering light. The others in the control room were quiet. Larkin could feel their eyes on her, but their presence seemed distant, almost irrelevant now. The artifact had bonded with her, and in that moment, she understood, something extraordinary had just begun. "Captain, are you all right?" Dr. Zhang's voice broke the silence, shaking Larkin from her reverie. Her hands were still tingling from the energy surges, and her vision blurred with remnants of alien symbols that no human had ever seen before. "I'm fine," Larkin replied, her voice steady despite the chaos swirling inside her. I think it's trying to tell me something." Zhang's voice came through the comms again, a mix of confusion and concern. "Tell you something? What do you mean?" Larkin hesitated, trying to form her thoughts into words. It was difficult to describe the sensation that had overtaken her. The artifact wasn't just an object, it was a living, breathing entity, a consciousness that existed outside the boundaries of her understanding. It was more than just technology, it was an intelligence, ancient and alien, and it had chosen her as its conduit. "I don't know how to explain it," Larkin said slowly, still trying to make sense of what had happened. "But I can feel it. It's like it's inside me, sharing its thoughts, its purpose." The silence on the other end of the comms felt heavy, like the others were trying to process what she had said. No one had expected this. No one had anticipated that the artifact would respond this way, especially not to a human. They had assumed it would be another failed experiment, a dead end in the pursuit of alien technology. But this was something different. "Captain," Dr. Zhang's voice was cautious now, "if what you're saying is true, we need to take this seriously. You may be the first person in history to communicate with an alien artifact. We don't fully understand what it can do, or what it means." Larkin nodded, though the others couldn't see her. She felt the weight of her responsibility pressing down on her. She was no longer just a soldier. She was the bridge between humanity and something ancient, something far beyond her understanding. The power, the energy coursing through her veins, she could feel it, deep inside, like a pulse resonating through every fiber of her being. "Do you think it's safe?" Sergeant Oliver's voice crackled through her earpiece, breaking her thoughts. His tone was laced with concern, but there was a hint of awe as well. The others in the control room were probably just as baffled and frightened as he was. The unknown had a way of terrifying even the bravest soldiers. "I don't know," Larkin admitted, her voice quieter now. "But I can't stop now. Whatever this artifact is, whatever it wants, I have to see it through. I have to understand it." The silence in the room stretched on, the weight of Larkin's words hanging in the air. She could feel the artifact's presence growing stronger, not just in the chamber but in her mind as well. The energy inside her surged again, rippling through her body like a current of electricity. She had to focus, to stay calm. The artifact was testing her, pushing her limits. Slowly, cautiously, she took a step forward. The artifact remained still, its metallic surface shimmering under the dim lights. It was waiting for her, like an animal ready to pounce. She didn't know what would happen next, but she knew that this moment would change everything. Her fingers hovered over the surface, and once again, the hum of the artifact filled the room. This time, it was different. It was stronger, more intense, and it felt familiar. As if the artifact had come to recognize her touch. Her heart raced as she pressed her palm against the surface once more. The energy responded instantly, the artifact rippling under her skin, sending waves of power coursing through her body. Then, the voice came again. "You are ready," it said, its tone deep, resonant, and commanding. The words weren't spoken aloud but were felt in the depths of her mind, as though the artifact's consciousness had fused with hers. "You are the one who will carry our burden." Larkin's breath caught in her throat. The voice, though calm, was filled with authority, ancient authority, as though it had seen countless generations before hers and would see countless more after. The artifact was not just a weapon or a piece of technology, it was something much more, something older and wiser than anything humanity could comprehend. "What burden?" Larkin asked, her voice shaky, her heart thundering in her chest. The response was immediate, the alien symbols flashing in her vision once again. This time, they were more coherent, more structured. It was like a map, but one that covered vast stretches of space, pinpointing locations she had never heard of. These were places far beyond Earth, planets and systems that had been lost to time. "The burden of the last war," the voice answered, its tone unwavering. "The war that destroyed our kind. The war that will soon come to your kind." Larkin's mind reeled. A war? What war? She had never heard of anything like this. Was the artifact speaking of an ancient conflict between alien species? Was this why it had rejected every other being that had tried to bond with it? Because it was choosing a human to carry its legacy? "You are the chosen one," the voice continued. "You will lead the fight, or you will fall." The room around her seemed to blur, the energy building once again, pressing down on her like a storm. Larkin's body tingled with power. She wasn't sure what this meant, what the artifact wanted from her, but she understood one thing with perfect clarity: the fate of humanity was now tied to this alien force, and it was in her hands to navigate the storm that was coming. "Captain, we need to get you out of there," Dr. Zhang's voice was filled with urgency. "This is too dangerous. You don't understand what you're dealing with." Larkin ignored her. She wasn't about to back away now. The artifact had spoken, and it had chosen her. She had no idea what lay ahead, but she knew one thing for certain: humanity was about to face something far beyond their comprehension. And whether they were ready or not, it was time to rise. The burden of knowledge. Captain Larkin stood in the dimly lit chamber, her hand still pressed against the pulsating surface of the artifact. The energy coursing through her was overwhelming, and her mind swirled with alien thoughts and images she could barely comprehend. The voice, ancient and unyielding, had told her she was the chosen one, but what exactly did that mean? What burden was she supposed to carry? And why had it chosen her, a human, when it had rejected every other species? "Captain," Dr. Zhang's voice crackled through the earpiece, breaking through Larkin's trance-like state. "We're monitoring your vitals. You're not responding to external stimuli. We need you to come back to the lab." Larkin snapped back to reality, her pulse racing. She couldn't explain it, but the artifact felt familiar, like an old friend calling out to her. The hum of the alien energy was all around her now, almost deafening, and she realized she could hear it in her bones as much as in her ears. It was speaking to her, but this time, the words were different. The war, the voice whispered, its tone urgent. You must prepare. They are coming. And your kind will be their salvation, or their destruction. Larkin's head swam as the alien symbols in her vision flickered like lightning. Each symbol seemed to pulse with an intensity that made her feel like she was being pulled into a different reality. But the reality around her, the cold, sterile containment chamber, was still very much there. The scientists, the soldiers, they were all real. The world she knew was still intact. Or was it? She clenched her fist, the smooth surface of the artifact now beneath her hand, as though it had become a part of her. The power, the energy, it was intoxicating. It promised her strength beyond imagination, but at what cost? She felt the weight of it, a weight she wasn't sure she was ready for. Captain, we need you to respond. Dr. Zhang repeated, his voice tinged with panic now. Larkin shook her head, trying to clear her thoughts. She needed to focus, to understand what was happening to her. She had no time to waste. The artifact had spoken of a war, something far beyond the conflict she had trained for in the military. This wasn't just about Earth. This wasn't just about humanity. This was bigger. Much bigger. The artifact's energy seemed to grow, wrapping around her like a second skin, feeding her thoughts and strength. She could feel her muscles tightening, her senses sharpening. She could hear every breath in the room, the sound of Dr. Zhang's voice growing distant as she tuned everything out. It wasn't just technology. It was a weapon. A weapon that could change the fate of the galaxy. You will need the knowledge to fight, the voice echoed in her mind, and suddenly, Larkin was no longer in the chamber. Her vision exploded into a new realm, one filled with holographic images and alien landscapes. It was as if the artifact had unlocked something deep inside her. She was no longer just a soldier. She was a vessel for something much greater. The images were like flashes of memories, disjointed and chaotic, yet somehow coherent. She saw alien battleships, huge, gargantuan ships with designs unlike anything Earth had ever seen. She saw armies of alien soldiers, warriors of 1,000 species, fighting against an enemy so ancient and relentless that they were known only as the Eternal. These creatures, if they could even be called that, were the remnants of a long-dead race, one that had once ruled the galaxy, but had since become little more than a living nightmare. They are coming, the voice whispered again. And they are hungry. Larkin's breath hitched as the images continued to pour into her mind. She saw planets burning, civilizations destroyed, their people wiped out in an instant. The Eternal were relentless, unstoppable. And yet, there was hope. The artifact was the key to fighting back. It was the last hope of an ancient race, one that had been wiped out in the war Larkin had seen. The artifact, the armor, had been created to protect those who would stand against the Eternal. And now, it had chosen her. Her hands tightened into fists, the weight of the knowledge settling into her bones. She was no longer just a human soldier. She was something else now. She was part of something much bigger, something far beyond her comprehension. She was the inheritor of a legacy that could either save the galaxy or doom it forever. Captain, respond. Dr. Zhang's voice cut through the madness again, this time sounding more urgent. We're getting reports of something approaching, something on its way here. Larkin snapped back to reality, gasping for breath. She could feel the cold sweat running down her back, the alien symbols still flashing in her mind. She had to act, and quickly. The war had already begun, and the Eternal were coming for Earth. But Larkin was ready. She had to be. This wasn't just about her anymore. This was about the survival of everything humanity had ever known. She spoke into the comms, her voice steady and calm despite the storm raging in her mind. Prepare the ship. We leave now. The room seemed to freeze, the urgency in her voice palpable as it rippled through the control room. The team of scientists, soldiers, and technicians all looked at each other, unsure of what exactly to do next. But there was no time for hesitation. Larkin had made her decision, and there was no turning back. As the team scrambled to prepare the ship for launch, Larkin's mind raced. She had just been thrust into a war, one she knew nothing about, but one that now demanded everything from her. She was the chosen one, the one who would carry the burden of saving humanity. But could she do it? Could she really protect Earth from an enemy so ancient and powerful? She had to believe she could. The energy from the artifact continued to surge through her, more powerful now than ever. She could feel its presence, its purpose, coursing through her veins. She wasn't just going to be a soldier in this fight, she was going to be a weapon. A living, breathing weapon capable of taking on the eternal. But she couldn't do it alone. "Get the team ready," Larkin ordered, her voice sharp and clear. "We're going to need all the firepower we can get. And we need to find out everything we can about these eternal. This war isn't just about us. It's about the future of the entire galaxy. The eternal threat." The ship's engines hummed beneath Captain Larkin's feet as the team prepared for their journey to the unknown. The air inside the military vessel was thick with tension, every officer and scientist aboard focused on their tasks. It was clear to Larkin that they all understood what was at stake, but none of them truly knew what they were about to face. They were about to venture into a war unlike anything they had ever imagined. A war against an ancient, ruthless enemy known only as the Eternal. Larkin stood at the helm, watching as the stars outside the viewport blurred into streaks of light. She had made the decision to take the fight to the enemy's doorstep, but now she was filled with a quiet, unshakable fear. What if the artifacts had been wrong? What if humanity was truly helpless against an adversary that had wiped out entire civilizations? The pressure weighed heavily on her, but she couldn't let her doubts show. "Captain," Dr. Zhang's voice crackled through her earpiece. "We've intercepted a transmission from the Eternal. It's fragmented, but we're piecing it together. You need to hear this." Larkin turned and walked toward the communications station, her boots echoing in the quiet of the ship's command deck. She looked over at the technician who was monitoring the transmission. His face was grim as he motioned for her to listen. "Play it," Larkin ordered. The transmission started with static, the voice a low, guttural growl that made Larkin's skin crawl. But then, it cleared. "The time of your species is ending." The voice was alien, distorted, but its meaning was crystal clear. "The Eternal will come for all that remains. You cannot fight what is inevitable. Your species is no more than a fleeting spark in the eternal darkness." The message was short, but its implications were enormous. The Eternal were confident, overconfident, even. They believed humanity was doomed before the fight even began. Larkin's eyes narrowed as she listened, but she didn't feel fear. No, it wasn't fear she felt, it was rage. Rage at the arrogance of an ancient enemy who thought they could wipe out a species so easily. "Where is this transmission coming from?" she asked, her voice steady. "From a region near the Andromeda Galaxy," the technician replied. "But the signal is too weak to get a clear location. It's as though they're hiding, or preparing for something." "Get me a better fix on that signal," Larkin commanded. "We can't afford to waste any time." The technician nodded, his fingers flying across the controls. Larkin turned away, her mind already working through their next moves. They had no idea how many ships the Eternal had in their fleet, but if that transmission was anything to go by, they were already within striking distance of Earth. Every moment counted. Dr. Zhang's voice interrupted her thoughts again. "Captain, we've also detected unusual energy readings in the same sector. Something big is coming." Larkin's heart skipped a beat. The Eternal were coming for them. She could feel it in her bones. The artifact's power surged again within her, its energy constantly reminding her of the responsibility she carried. She was humanity's last hope, and she could already feel the weight of the burden. Set course for the energy readings, Larkin ordered, her jaw set with determination. We don't wait for them to come to us. We meet them head-on. As the ship hurtled through space toward the unknown, Larkin couldn't help but think back to the strange vision she'd experienced in the artifact's chamber. The images of the Eternal were burned into her mind, twisted, nightmarish creatures, their forms barely resembling anything humanoid. They were ancient, but more than that, they were relentless. And now they were coming for Earth, for humanity. The artifact had promised her power enough to fight back against the Eternal. But power came at a cost. Every time she used it, she felt a little more like a machine, a little less like a human. The armor's presence inside her mind was constant, like a whisper she couldn't shake. It was tempting, this power. It made her feel invincible, unstoppable. But it also made her wonder, would she remain herself? Or would she become something else entirely? Something that wasn't human anymore. Captain, Dr. Zhang's voice pulled her out of her thoughts. We're approaching the sector where the energy readings are coming from. You'll need to be ready. Larkin nodded, standing straighter. She took a deep breath and walked toward the command seat, settling into it. Her hands gripped the armrests tightly, her knuckles white. This was it. The moment of truth. She had no more time for doubts or second guesses. Earth was counting on her. Full stop, she ordered. The ship's engines hummed as they slowed, the vastness of space outside the viewport now filled with the eerie glow of distant stars. But Larkin's gaze was fixed on the readings flashing before her. The energy source was growing stronger, closer. Prepare for combat, Larkin commanded, her voice colder now, sharper. We don't know what we're walking into, but we're going to be ready. The ship moved silently, creeping toward the energy source. Larkin could feel the tension in the air, the anticipation building as the team geared up for whatever lay ahead. The soldiers were already in their combat suits, weapons ready. The scientists huddled together, preparing their equipment. Everyone knew that this was no ordinary mission. This was survival. Captain, we're getting a visual, the technician at the sensor station said, his voice tight with anxiety. It's huge. There's a fleet out there. Anne. Larkin leaned in, her gaze fixed on the screen. The image flickered, then cleared to show an enormous fleet, ships the size of moons, slowly creeping through space toward Earth. The Eternal had arrived. We need to get in front of them, now, Larkin ordered, her voice cutting through the tension. Set course for the leading ship. We're going to make our stand there. As the ship surged forward, the reality of the situation settled in. They were about to face an enemy the likes of which humanity had never seen. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and facing an ancient force with technology beyond their wildest dreams. But Captain Larkin didn't back down. Not now. Not when humanity's future was on the line. The artifact pulsed within her, a steady reminder of her power, and her purpose. The enemy was coming, but so was she. The battle begins. The ship trembled as it pierced through the blackness of space, cutting a path toward the massive fleet of the Eternal. Captain Larkin stood at the helm, her gaze unwavering, her heart pounding with anticipation. The endless expanse of the universe stretched before her, but her focus was razor-sharp, locked on the enemy ships that loomed ahead. The time for hesitation was long past. This was no longer just a mission, it was the survival of the human race. Captain, Dr. Zhang's voice interrupted her thoughts. We're receiving a transmission from the enemy fleet. They're demanding our surrender. Larkin didn't flinch. The enemy might have the power of ages behind them, but humanity had something they didn't, heart. Play it, she ordered. The transmission came through as a low, threatening hum, followed by a voice, dark, cold, and alien. You will surrender. Resistance is futile. The Eternal will consume all. Larkin's grip tightened on the console. They'll never get what they want, she muttered under her breath. To her team, she said, "Prepare for combat. I want all weapons primed. We'll show them what humanity is capable of." The crew scrambled into position, their faces set with determination. The soldiers were at their stations, ready to engage, while the scientists monitored energy readings and weapon systems. Every second mattered now. The fleet of the Eternal was close, too close. Larkin could feel the heat of the moment, the pressure mounting, but she remained steady. She had no intention of backing down. "Captain, we've been locked onto," the communications officer announced. "They're targeting our shields." "Shields up," Larkin commanded, her voice cold and commanding. "Brace for impact." The ship rocked as a barrage of alien energy weapons slammed against their shields. The vessel groaned under the pressure, but the shields held. "For now. We're taking fire, but the shields are holding," the technician confirmed, though his voice betrayed the anxiety that was palpable in the room. "We're in the enemy's sights now, Captain. We need to act fast." Larkin's eyes narrowed as she assessed the battlefield. The enemy ships were vast, their technology far more advanced than anything Earth had at its disposal. But they weren't just facing an enemy fleet, they were facing a race that had underestimated humanity. Time and again, the Eternal had dismissed humanity as insignificant. But now, Captain Larkin and her crew were going to prove them wrong. "Deploy countermeasures," Larkin ordered. "And get me a direct line to our allies in the fleet." Within moments, the communication link was established with the rest of Earth's defense forces. The line was crackling with static, but Larkin's voice was strong as she spoke. "This is Captain Larkin of the Earth Defense Fleet," she said, her words sharp and clear. "We've engaged the enemy. I need all ships to form up and prepare for a coordinated strike. We'll hold them off together, or we won't hold them off at all." There was a brief silence before a voice responded, gritty and determined. "Understood, Captain. We're with you." Larkin felt a surge of pride as she heard the confirmation. Humanity had always been at its best when it came together. It didn't matter how advanced the Eternal were or how overwhelming their numbers might seem. The Earth was not going down without a fight. "Activate our weapons," Larkin commanded, her voice unwavering. "All fighters, prepare for launch. We're going to show these bastards exactly what humanity can do." As the battle raged on outside, Larkin could feel the artifact pulsing within her, its energy more intense with each passing moment. She didn't need to understand it fully, she only needed to trust it. The power it offered was undeniable, and as she focused, she could feel the connection between herself and the artifact grow stronger. The voices of the Eternal, cold and unfeeling, faded into the background as her focus shifted. "You are human." The voice resonated in her mind, steady and calm, like a whisper in the storm. "Primitive, yet strong." The armor shifted, adjusting itself to the power of her thoughts, responding to her every command with precision. She was no longer just Captain Larkin. She was something more. The armor had chosen her, and now it was giving her the strength to face down the enemy fleet. "Captain," Dr. Zhang's voice came through once again. "We've detected something strange. The Eternal ships are deploying energy pulses, they're targeting the gravity wells of the nearby moons. It looks like they're trying to destabilize the system." Larkin's blood ran cold. The Eternal didn't just want to defeat humanity, they wanted to destroy everything that Earth stood for. The moons were crucial to the stability of the system. If the Eternal succeeded in destabilizing them, the entire system would fall apart, throwing Earth and all its colonies into chaos. "We can't let that happen," Larkin said, her voice low but filled with resolve. "Deploy all remaining fighters. I'll take care of the fleet myself." Her hands moved quickly, engaging the controls of the ship, and within seconds, the fighter squadron was launched, cutting through the vacuum of space toward the enemy. The Earth fleet followed behind, ready to engage in full-force combat. As the fighters raced toward the Eternal ships, Larkin's ship remained in position, its weapons primed and ready. She had no illusions that they would win this fight easily. But she didn't need to win it easily, she just needed to make sure the Eternal knew they'd been in a fight. The battle that unfolded outside was a symphony of chaos. Energy blasts lit up the dark expanse of space, ships weaving in and out of each other's fire as fighters darted through the chaos. The Earth fleet wasn't just fighting for survival, they were fighting for their future, for the future of every person on Earth and beyond. Larkin's ship was locked in combat with one of the enemy flagships. The massive vessel loomed ahead, its weapons pounding against the Earth ship's shields with devastating force. The ship groaned under the pressure, but the shields held steady, absorbing the energy blasts. "This is it," Larkin said under her breath as she prepared the final offensive. "Time to end this." She engaged the weapons, launching a series of devastating missiles at the flagship. The weapons tore through the enemy's shields, leaving them vulnerable. The ship's core began to destabilize, and Larkin could feel the artifact's power surge inside her, fueling her every move. With a final, mighty blast, the flagship exploded into a million pieces, its wreckage scattering across the void. Larkin let out a breath, her heart pounding in her chest. The battle wasn't over, far from it, but the first victory had been won. And that victory, she knew, was just the beginning. The Eternal had underestimated humanity. Now they would learn what it truly meant to face the fury of the human spirit. The final stand. The battlefield was a twisted mosaic of shattered ships, scattered debris, and the remnants of what was once a mighty fleet. Captain Larkin stood at the helm of the Earth Defense flagship, her hands steady on the controls, her eyes scanning the void. The Eternal fleet was battered, but not broken. The war was far from over. The true test was yet to come. The ship's screens flickered with incoming data. The Eternal's flagship had been destroyed, but the remaining fleet was still a formidable force. Several warships, their hulls darkened by battle, formed a tight formation, preparing for one last offensive. The Eternal weren't just fighting for control, they were fighting for the survival of their species. "Captain," Dr. Zhang's voice came through once again, his tone urgent. "They've activated their final weapon, a supermassive energy cannon. It's targeting Earth." Larkin felt a cold, icy wave of dread wash over her. Earth. The planet that had fought so hard to survive, to build, to grow, now it was at the mercy of an ancient enemy who had no respect for life. The Eternal wanted to erase humanity from existence. "We can't let them get another shot," Larkin said, her voice low but filled with a fierce resolve. "Prepare the fleet for the final assault." The crew worked quickly, engaging the last-ditch weapons and preparing their final strategy. It was all or nothing now. The Eternal had given them no other choice. "We have one shot at this," Larkin continued. "If we don't stop them now, Earth will fall." The tension in the control room was palpable. Every person present knew what was at stake. For most of them, this would be their final stand. Their legacy would either be one of victory, or humanity's last gasp in the face of a much stronger enemy. "Captain," one of the technicians said, his voice strained, "the artifact is reacting. It's pulsing again. It's almost like, it's guiding us." Larkin nodded. The artifact, the strange, ancient armor that had chosen her, was more than just a weapon. It had become a part of her, a connection deeper than she had ever imagined. She could feel it in her bones, like a second heartbeat, guiding her movements and bolstering her resolve. It was as if the artifact knew this moment was the endgame. "All ships, prepare to engage," she ordered, her voice steady despite the mounting pressure. "We'll take the fight to them." The Earth fleet launched into motion, its fighters darting out from the flagship and skimming across the debris field of the previous battle. The Eternal fleet, ever vigilant, formed a battle line, their weapons primed and ready to fire. But Larkin wasn't afraid. She had the power of humanity, and the artifact, at her side. As the two fleets closed in, the sky turned into a storm of laser fire and energy pulses, a dazzling display of power that illuminated the dark expanse of space. The Earth fighters swooped in and out, striking with precision, their weapons cutting through the enemy ships with deadly force. But the Eternal were relentless, adapting quickly, and they fought back with an intensity that mirrored the desperation Larkin felt inside her. "Focus fire on their command ships," Larkin barked. "If we take out their leaders, the rest will fall apart." The fleet followed her orders without hesitation. Waves of energy blasts flew toward the heart of the Eternal formation, targeting their command ships, vulnerable and central to their operation. One by one, the enemy ships began to explode in brilliant flashes of light, their hulls disintegrating into nothingness. But the battle was far from won. The Eternal were nothing if not tenacious. A massive explosion suddenly shook the flagship. The shields flickered, and alarms blared as the ship shuddered under the impact. Larkin held her ground, gripping the controls tightly as the tremors racked the ship. "Report," she shouted. "Direct hit to the starboard engine," the technician replied. "We've lost power on that side. We're drifting." "Damn it," Larkin cursed under her breath. She had to keep them fighting. They couldn't afford to lose now. "Captain," Dr. Zhang said, urgency in his voice. "We've analyzed the enemy's cannon. It's charging again, at full power. If it fires this time, it will take out Earth. We have no time." Larkin's mind raced. The cannon could fire at any moment. Her fleet was broken, and their ships were scattered. The odds of making it out alive were slim, but then, she'd never been one to back down when things seemed impossible. "All remaining ships, follow me," she called. "We have one shot to end this, and I'm taking it." She guided the flagship toward the remaining Eternal warships, her eyes locked on the target. The supermassive energy cannon glowed with a dangerous light, gathering all the power of the Eternal fleet into one massive shot. Her heart pounded in her chest, the adrenaline coursing through her. The artifact pulsed with energy, sending a jolt of power through her body. She could feel it in her veins, in her very soul. The armor wasn't just a tool, it was part of her now, guiding her every move. "Captain." Dr. Zhang's voice broke through the chaos. "The cannon is about to fire." Without thinking, Larkin made her move. The flagship surged forward, its remaining engines flaring with all the power they could muster. The energy cannon shot a blinding beam toward Earth, its destructive force threatening to annihilate everything in its path. But Larkin had a plan. At the last possible moment, she activated the artifact's power. A massive surge of energy shot from her ship, and for a split second, the universe itself seemed to stop. The two beams collided, and the entire battlefield was bathed in a searing light. The Eternal's cannon began to crack, its energy destabilizing as the Earth's counterattack overwhelmed it. With a final, earth-shattering explosion, the energy cannon imploded, sending shockwaves across the battlefield. The fleet of the Eternal was thrown into disarray as their most powerful weapon was destroyed. And then, the artifact did something it had never done before. The entire Earth fleet felt it, a surge of energy unlike anything they had ever experienced. The remaining ships began to glow with a strange, ethereal light. The artifact had turned the tide. As the last of the Eternal warships were destroyed, Larkin's ship sailed through the remnants of the battlefield, its mission complete. The enemy had been defeated. Larkin stood at the helm, looking out into the void as the battle finally ended. There was no cheering, no celebration, just the quiet satisfaction of knowing that humanity had fought and won. The cost had been high, and many lives had been lost, but Earth had survived. The Eternal had underestimated humanity, and in the end, it was their downfall. The silence stretched on, broken only by the faint hum of the artifact, still pulsing in the background, a reminder that humanity's strength was limitless. No force, no matter how ancient, would ever take Earth down again.